Welcome. This presentation is all about the mystery that is resolving operational difficulties that you may find in your company. Here at KPI, we approach all engagements like a mystery because that is what they are. Your company has put together processes, tools, and personnel that constitute a strong productive force. Still, there is something that is not performing as you would like. It happens to every company. The needs of the customer change, which changes the functions of the business, which changes the processes and tools of each department. Suddenly, you find that cohesive team has lost some of its cohesion, which may be costing you some of your competitive advantage. That's a liability you can't withstand. That is where we come in. KPI looks at the larger organization and the smaller departments to isolate, identify, and course correct the aspects of your business that are keeping you from performing well. In order to do that, we must unravel the mystery of your difficulties. Why do we refer to the problem as a mystery? Well, because operational slowdowns are never due to just one factor, one tool, or one function. You could throw a tool at the problem, and it will likely just produce more of the problem at a faster pace. You can use a process methodology, such as Lean or Six Sigma, and it will likely make one or more aspects of your organization more efficient or more effective, but it won't engage cross-functional slowdowns. The focus is too narrow. There are a lot of things that you can do, and we recommend all of them so long as you have the excess personnel, the right talents, the organizational patience, and the available capital to use them completely. We have the personnel, the talents, and the availability to execute on your deliverables in a way that will save you 40 to 80% of the cost, along with delivery on a shorter timeline than you doing this in-house. Every mystery has the following core elements: characters, setting, plot, clues, assumptions, distractions, structure, and conclusion. You'll find these elements in your mystery as well, though common business practices don't use these words. We'll go into each of these in more detail. First, let's take a look at the characters in your mystery. It's important to remember that your characters aren't always people. They can also be a place, such as a site, region, or functional area, and it can also be a thing, such as facilities, equipment, tools, systems, or the logic that those systems or tools use. The main characters are always the following. Victims. There are three types of victims that we want to look at. The historical victim, which is who or what the problem is already impacted. The current victim, which would be who or what the problem is impacting currently. And the future victims, which would be who or what might be impacted by the problem in the future. Next, we have the investigators. The lead investigator is a person or persons responsible for solving the problem. The investigative team are the people who aid in solving the problem, and these might include subject matter experts, administrative aides, vendors, project or program administration, as well as others. And next we have the suspects and culprit. The suspect is the first attempt at finding the problem areas or culprit. It may be correct, but you would have to prove it. It may be incorrect, and you would have to disprove it in order to focus on finding the real culprit. The full problem is usually unknown at the beginning of your mystery. The other characters are just as important, as one or more of them is likely to be your culprit. There are some things you need to ask about the other characters. Who are they really? How did they get into this picture? And what don't we know about them yet? Next, let's take a look at the plot of your mystery. What is your problem? Is something missing? And if so, was it lost or stolen? Is something new needed? If so, can it be addressed by what we have? Or does it require that something new be built or bought? Was something or someone damaged? And if so, can it or they be fixed? Can you stop the damage from reoccurring? Or is this simply a matter of justice, however you define that? How do we find our clues? First, we'll talk with the people involved. Second, we'll talk with the people upstream and downstream of our problem area. And lastly, we want to reconstruct the problem with data. How do you identify important versus non-important clues? Does it fit with your reconstruction? Does it make sense with what you already know? If it doesn't, does it make sense as new information? And what are the gaps in your reconstruction? Taking a look at the setting of your mystery, when does the problem happen? Did it happen on a big project, on a small project, or is this more of an operational problem? Is there a trigger to the problem? Where does the problem happen? Does the problem happen at some sites or regions, or is it an enterprise-wide problem? Does it affect only a few people, or does it affect everyone? And lastly, how does the problem happen? Now, this may not be known, but will be discovered later in the process of building your mystery. When looking at the clues to your mystery, one thing is important to remember, and that is information is king. All information has the potential to be a clue. Information becomes a clue if it helps to fill a gap in your reconstruction. You'll want to make sure to see the problem for yourself. You don't have others' understanding, and they know things that you don't. Most of us filter out the obvious and the oblivious when we recall a situation. That filtered information could be among your most important clues. Lastly, you want to call in the experts, and that could include subject matter experts or lay people at the problem site. Assumptions are one of the two most commonly overlooked aspects of any mystery. Don't attempt to predetermine the scope. The problem may be larger or narrower than you originally believed it to be. Your understanding of the problem will clarify as the process goes on. Don't accept another's scope. Initial information can be scope limiting, which will hamper you from getting to the full scope and consequently the full solution. And lastly, you want to ask, what are the untrue or incomplete facts? Oftentimes we are given incomplete facts. For example, I breathe better here because it's an arid climate. Or another example, you get 40 miles to the gallon if you're on flat highway with little traffic. In Washington, D.C. politics, there is this concept of a true fact, and that is a fact that is real, complete, easily replicated, and universal. Distractions are the second most commonly overlooked aspect of a mystery. Are there competing priorities that you have to factor in? For example, are there other major initiatives going on at the same time? Are there budget constraints we have to take into account? Is there executive or managerial pressure to get this resolved? Is there a deadline by which we have to resolve this? Are there resource constraints on the primary and secondary characters? Or is there low-hanging fruit that frankly is too tempting to go after and will prevent you from getting to the full solution? It's important to remember, nothing helps a problem continue like a distracted focus. Next, we want to look at the structure of our mystery. We want to understand our victims, otherwise known as the voice of the customer. How is the victim being victimized? What is it costing the victim? Is it time, money, functionality, possession, or life? Is the victim really a victim? We also want to understand the motive otherwise known as the voice of the process. Is the process deliberately faulty? An example of this is a refrigerator is not meant to be a freezer. Another way could be that the process is simply insufficient to the task. An example of this could be most freezers don't have the capacity of a refrigerator. And lastly, we want to understand the culprit, otherwise known as the voice of the business. And the question to ask here is our culprit a victim? What I mean by that is the culprit causing the problem as a result of compensating for it or their own problem? And finally, we want to bring our mystery to a conclusion. The whole point of many mysteries is to keep the problem from happening again. You must determine when, where, and how it will happen next, and you must intercede before it can happen again. Next, you must address the problem. This is typically done in one of three ways. Defense is a systematic prevention for a culprit that can't be completely stopped. Detainment is a means to contain and/or isolate the culprit so that the problem doesn't occur for a time. Destruction is incapacitating the problem so that it no longer exists. And finally, we have the aftermath. And the question here is, are the victims, if they're actively in the picture, better off with the solution? If so, then we've built a good solution. A question that is all too often asked is everyone happy with the solution? Invariably, the answer to this question is no. You can't please everyone all the time. But if we've created a better way forward for our victims, then we have done our best work. We will follow this up with an example of our mystery and elements in practice very shortly. Thank you for taking part in this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.